Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Microsoft Dynamics GP budgeting webinar. My name is Matt Fleming and I am the Sales and Marketing Manager at Advantage for Microsoft Dynamics GP. I've got Stephen Rail with me, who's one of our senior consultants. Stephen's going to take us through budgeting. We're thinking this is going to last somewhere in the region of 30 to 40 minutes, so it should help your lunch settle nicely. You are all in mute mode at the moment because we've got 4 or 5 people on the call, and rather than 4 or 5 people asking questions at the same time, we'd be grateful if you use the questions area on your GoToWebinar control panel on the right hand side. If you pop your questions in there, I'll be monitoring those questions. As and when I get 5 minutes to disturb Stephen in his flow, I will ask those questions as we go along. If you need anything else post the demonstration, please feel free to contact your account manager. I'll be contacting everybody anyway after the webinar, just saying thank you very much and asking for some feedback. And once we get that feedback, if you want to contact us directly, you're welcome to do that as well. So thank you very much for attending, and I'll hand over to Stephen.
Thanks, Matt. Good afternoon, everybody. As Matt said, this session is going to be focusing on budgeting. And for the purpose of the budgeting workshop, I'm going to be using GP 2015, but all of the features that I'm going to show relating to budgeting are available in earlier versions. So basically anyone from GP 2010 upwards, these features will be available. Okay, as we know, when we go to our cards menu and under financial, we have our budget section. So typically when we're looking at budgeting, there are 2 ways that you can create a budget within GP. The first option is that we can use a budget using Microsoft Dynamics GP, which is basically asking us to create a budget ID. This could be a test budget. We can put a description in. We can choose the budget year that this applies to. And then we would pick an individual account, and then we can go into the budgeting figure and we can enter the values, but that would be one budget at a time. Most people would not even entertain that option, but would rather go with the budgeting wizard for Excel, which is the most widely used one. As you can see on my Fabricam system, I've created 4 budgets. And I've chosen in this case that I'm filtering on segment 1, which is a divisional segment in this case. And what I'm doing is just going to walk through creating another one using a different segment option. So we go new budget using the budget wizard for Excel. Click next. Then we enter an ID for it. So I'm going to call this initial 300. Optional description for it. We then have an option of how to base this budget. It's either on a financial year or a date range, and then we can select the year or the date range for it. So if I say it's 2017, click next. We then are faced with a number of choices. So if we're looking at an open year percent, which is the option at the top, that is going to say that you're going to base the budget on the actuals for a current open year, in which case you will have the option of being able to increase or decrease those actuals by a fixed percentage. We can also take a previous budget and we can apply a percentage increase or decrease on that, or we can take a history option as well, or in most cases it will probably be based on a blank budget which will be distributed to different divisional or departmental heads, and you would ask them to enter in the information for their department or division. So in this case we'll take blank budget and we'll click next. Then we can choose to output within the workbook any number of years, whether it's history or open, of the actuals for the set of accounts that we choose. So in this case, I'm going to choose 2017, but to get multiple years, I could have the actuals outputted for 2015, 16, and 17. I'm not going to do that because pretty much all my data in Fabricam is in 2017. Click Next. Then we get a further choice of, do we want to include balance sheet accounts? Is it only going to be profit and loss accounts? And are we optionally including any non-financial accounts, unit accounts such as head count or the square footage relating to a building as an example? So in this case, I'm just going to choose the profit and loss accounts. When I go to the next button, it will say, do you want to include all accounts? Well, this budget is going to be based on the segment 1 value being equal to 300. So I would tick Select Accounts, and then from the segment I can choose which segment I want to apply. So in this case it will be division, and then from the lookup against division I can choose sales, which is 300, to sales, and I can choose to insert that. I could then further restrict this by looking at, say, the departmental code, which is segment 3 in this case, then I could restrict it further in that way. If I'm happy with the selection I've got here, I would go next, and it will give me a review of the accounts selected within that range. If I wish to deselect any account, I would just untick it. So if I pick one off the bottom, then I wouldn't be including that particular account. Or if I want to add an account, I can click Add Account, and I can then pick from the chart which one I would like to add. Once you're happy with the selection that has been made in here, you can go next, and then you get a choice of either outputting this to a new workbook or an existing one. I'm going to choose a new workbook. You get a review of what you've done, so you can always go back if you've made a mistake somewhere along the line, and click Finish. Then it will say, what do we want to call this? So I'm going to choose that one and change it from 200 to 300, and click Open, and now it will go off and it will start outputting the budget, and it opens automatically on the screen for me. Now, depending on the version of GP that you're using, in some cases you will find that the headings that we have here will be rejected by the system when you come to import it. That will probably be true if we were looking at GP 2010 or prior, in which case we had to come in and change these to period 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up to 12. But on GP 2015 that issue doesn't apply any longer. So when we're looking at the budget for this template, we would come in to enter in the values. So just as an example, if I say in period 1 it's 12,500, and period 2 is 13,000, and this is 10,000, 20,000, and we would go on so forth and so forth, and at the end you can see it's updated the total automatically for me. And if we then scroll to the bottom of the spreadsheet, each one of those columns is added up at the bottom, and we have an overall total. So I'm now just going to go and fill something else in. So here we've got sales of hardware. I'm going to say that that's 45,000, and I can say that's 20,000, and I would update those. So now my totals at the bottom have updated based on the new balance of that column. Within this formatted spreadsheet, we can choose to remove anything we like. So if I don't want to include these accounts, I could just right click and delete, and I can add insert lines as long as I'm not affecting the section between cell 1 through to cell 3. I have to leave these intact, but basically I can move everything else down as long as I have a total on the bottom. So full flexibility of insert, remove, as long as the basic formatting on the header and footer is maintained. On this tab, we asked to output the actuals for the financial year 2017, and that shows me that we've got commission sales on that line for periods 1 through 4, and I could, if I wanted to, copy the information from here into this budget, or I could choose when I come to do this, this is my actuals, and then from period 5 onwards this would be the budget. So I'm using a mixture of actuals up to a point and then the budget thereafter. So that would be more applicable if we were dealing with a forecast budget as opposed to the initial annual budget. So having made those changes, we'll just click Save, and then I will close that budget. And then to bring that information into GP, I would go to Excel and import from Excel, and then the budget wizard then really works in reverse. So I would then select the budget I'm importing to, which is that one, click Next, then I'm browsing to where the file is, which is here, and then I can see the two sheets. So if I want to import the actual sheet, I would choose this one, or I can choose the initial 300 one. Gives me a review, but I can go back if I chose the wrong thing, and then Finish. Should import the budget back into Dynamics GP. So that was exporting a blank budget out, filling in some information on it, and then bringing that back in. The next topic is I've got an initial budget, and then I have these departmental versions. So I'm just going to go into each one of these just to update some values. So if I'm looking at sales in this case, I can say that this is 100,000, 25,000, 50,000, and save. And then if I go to my 100, this has got salaries, so I'm going to say that this is 5,000, 6,000, 5,000, save. And then the 200, which is the last one. $15,000, $10,000. Okay, so having created that, we've now got a number of budgets which in a real world scenario we've sent out to different divisional heads or budget holders. We've asked them to fill in the information relating to their own budget. They've then sent that budget information back in, and now we want to import this information back into the system. So for these ones, we're going to import from Excel, pick the budget that we're importing for, browse to the file, choose the sheet, and import that. And then we can do the same thing for 100. And then lastly we'll go for the 200. So we've now imported into the system the budget figures relating to department 000, 100, 200 and 300, which is all well and good, but from a reporting standpoint we don't want to be using either Management Reporter or FRX Reporter if you're on an older version, and have different columns where we're pulling those individual budget figures in, which will probably be hidden columns, and then you'll have a calculation which is adding them all together. So in this particular case we want to replace, for reporting purposes, these 4 budgets into one single budget. And to do that we can't use the wizard, but what we can do is we can go to a new budget using Dynamics GP, and you'll see that we have a combined budgets button that exists on that window. So when I click on that, it then says, which is your master budget? Okay, so the master budget is called initial, which is a blank at the moment, and then combine with budget 000. And then there's an option here about delete the budget after it is combined. So I'm going to choose that option and click process. Process was successful. Now I would go back and choose initial, and this time you'll see that the 00's disappeared. I've got the 100, process, then the 200, and then finally the 300. Obviously it's not a prerequisite to delete the other budgets. You may want to keep those for forecasting purposes later on. But now that we've done that, we now have a single budget, which if I output this to Excel, and now we'll have the combined budget that's coming from those 4 different divisions into one budget, which we would then be using within our reporting tool. So I know that we only entered some data on a few fields, but we can see that they've come through here. Okay. Each of these salaries ones is based on a different code, so therefore that's why those amounts will be separate. But that's how we would create multiple budgets, distribute them within our organisation, have those budgets filled in, import those budgets, and then combine them into a single budget which can then be used within your management reporting setup. In addition to that, within these versions of GP, we introduced the option of being able to enter budget transactions. So if you're an organisation that do an initial annual budget and then you're doing quarterly forecasting, or it could be on a bigger frequency, I guess, then instead of having those separate budgets, you may choose to start with an annual budget for the year, but then you post transactions to increase or decrease those budget figures as part of the forecast process. So the setup screen for doing this is if we go into Tools, Setup, Financial and General Ledger. Next budget journal entry is set to 1. Okay, but it could be set to another number if you wanted. And then we can choose to maintain history on budget transactions by ticking this checkbox. Click OK. And then once we've enabled the budgeting transactions, we go into Transactions Financial, and it appears here on the menu. And then here, journal number 1, transaction date is today. We can put it into a batch if we want to. So if I call this budget test, add the batch, choose the budget ID. Okay, and then we can choose the account number. And then from here we can choose a calculation method and we can fill in the values, and then we would post that transaction. So if I just come in here and say the adjustment on period 4 is $25,000 and click post. So it's in a batch, so I have to save it. Go to my batches. And hit post, and then I'll get a posting journal and an audit trail code as we would see with a normal posting account for an actual. So now we can summarize the transactions because they're going into a separate table, So within your reporting mechanism, you would choose to calculate the sum on this year-month combination for these accounts. So therefore it would give you the start point on the budget plus the movement on a month-by-month basis to give you a new year-to-date. Outside of using budget transactions, some clients will be using analytical accounting. And within analytical accounting, that also offers the option of having an analytical accounting budget. So if you do use analytical accounting, you need to determine whether your normal process would be to budget at the general ledger account level, in which case the normal budget would probably apply. And some of the customers that I'm familiar with that use AA budget at that level, so they use normal budgeting. But if you wish to budget at the dimension level, then you need to use a separate budget mechanism, which is the analytical accounting budget. And then within your reporting mechanism, if you're using management reporter, then that's obviously picked up within your AA company or the data mart if you're using that. So I'm just going to walk you through the process of how to create, or one example of creating an analytical budget. So on the cards menu, go to Financial and Analytical Accounting, and we have Budget Tree. In Budget Tree, I can call this 2017 AA. Then I've got two dimensions here. I'm going to choose Project for this example only, and then I can go to Codes, having saved the ID. Then it will show me by default the first to last code that exists. If you don't want this option, you can use the spyglass to make a selection of the codes. I've only got a couple in here as an example. And then you would go Assign. So now I've got a budget tree called 2017 AA, which has now got two projects in it. If I then click Budget and Save, it takes me to the next window, which is to create a budget ID, and it's this ID that would be picked up in your reporting tool. So if I call this AA project, I then choose the financial or the budget year, which in this case is 2017. Then I can pick the budget tree, which I've just created. And then you can see on the tree, I can see the same information we saw on the previous window. Now you have a choice about how you want to deal with the budget. Are you rolling down or are you rolling up? So if you're going to roll down, then you need to be entering a total. So at the tree level, the total would need to be defined, and then when you roll down, the roll down values would be the individual amounts for each project. Or the alternative is to go the other way. So I'm going to say roll up, okay, which means I'll be rolling up the values from these two projects into the top level. Now you can do this manually by clicking one of the nodes and then manually entering the values in here, or you can choose to go and use the export mechanism. So I'm going to choose that, and I'm going to output to an existing workbook, which I have one, which is here, and click OK. And it's now exporting that budget into a format that looks like this. Now you'll see that the information begins on line 3 and line 1 is hidden from you, as well as we can't see the columns A and B. This is because there is specific coding from Microsoft that is embedded into those areas, and therefore it hides it by default. So unlike the normal Excel budgeting wizard, where I've explained that you can insert lines, you can delete lines, as long as you don't interfere with the header or the footer, with the analytical accounting budget, that's not the case. You would need to make sure that you maintain the formatting. So if you're missing a project, as an example, you can't just come and insert a line here and then import it. It will fail. So once we've got the information in here, we would go to a period. So if I say here for the upgrade project, the budget figure is 12,500, and for 2015 it's 100,000. Then the total here on the tree, which is 2017 AA, has to be the total of those. So that would be 112,500. And then we would do other periods. To save some time, I'm just going to go to the right hand side. I'll copy those three figures. And then onto my totals I would fill this in. So if I was inputting information into another column, I would need to then update it. But once you've got this information, you can then click Save. And then, as we saw with the previous example, we have an option of being able to import the budget. So import this time, browse for the file that we've just created. Then it shows the sheets. In this case, it's current. When I click OK, hopefully it will import the budget. It does give me an error report at the end, which also includes whether it successfully imports. And you can see that it says the budget was imported successfully. So now we can see there's 100,000 on that one and 12,500 on the upgrade project. And then within our management reporting option, we would then pick the budget ID, which is listed as AA project, and then it would give us the monthly value or the year-to-date value depending on what column you've selected. So the only other thing that we might want to consider is how you're going to deal with forecasting. So is forecasting going to be another budget? So you will have the initial budget and then you'll have each of the forecasts, and within your reporting tool you're going to specify those. Or are we looking to use the budget transactions to update the initial year budget? These are all factors to consider. And then whether or not your forecast is based on the actuals up to that point and then the budget figures thereafter. Again, the Excel budgeting wizard or the AA budget will cater for that option. And then finally, the other option which I've seen in some organisations is instead of using actuals and budgets, some organisations prefer to create a new GP company called the budget company, and therefore they post journals as actuals into that database, and then they consolidate that within either Management Reporter or FRX Reporter. So there are a number of choices. Clearly, if we're using the normal Excel budgeting, it's at the GL level, so your reporting tool will roll those figures up into a number of accounts for you. Or you can budget at the AA level if you're using dimensions and dimension codes, or you could be choosing that you budget in a completely different basis. So if your budgeting is not based on the general ledger code, it's based on another factor, then you might be either using a completely different tool, and there's a number out there on the market which your account managers would be happy to discuss with you, or you may be maintaining your budgets outside of GP in Excel, and then within your reporting mechanism you're bringing those budgeted figures in to the row and column configuration that you've asked for. Outside of that, we have a number of inquiry screens just to finish up. So if I click Save there, when we go into the inquiry window for financial, we can see budget summary, budget versus actual, and budget journal entry inquiry. So we look at these windows. So when we choose the account number and choose the budget, it would then show us the budgeted figure. That's on a single account, or we could be looking at the budget versus actual for the same account. Pick the budget ID that I'm using, and then now I can see in the periods, these are the actuals, these are the budget figures, and it gives me the variance and variance percentage on screen. And then for any line you could then drill down to the actuals to look at the transactions that physically made up that actual amount. Or we can go to the budget journal inquiry and we can see the journals that we created using the budget transactions method. Or we can look at the budget transaction summary. And we can see there's the adjustment there, drill down, and that will take me back to the journal where we entered that budget information. So outside of using a third-party application, that's pretty much everything that we have relating to budgets in either GP 2010 or above. And if you have any questions, we've obviously got some time to consider those. Are there any questions, Matt?
No, there are no questions at the minute. Obviously, if you think something after the event, then by all means drop me an email. I will follow up the event, contact everybody, and let you know where the YouTube version of this is, so that you can have a look at that or share that with colleagues. But we haven't had any questions. We've gone along. It's been really useful. As Stephen alluded to, we do work with other partners as well to provide possibly more complex, more capable budgeting tools. We work with Prophix, we work with Centage, we work with Solver, who are all providing more scalable product if you want. And all of those solutions actually integrate with Dynamics GP. We've built interfaces to all of them. So if you haven't seen what you needed there from a budgeting tool, perhaps there's another product that we can introduce you to. Best person to speak about that would be your account manager, but as I say, I will drop you a line after the event. So you'll have my email address. Please feel free to contact me. I'll also be asking for some feedback, helping us improve these sessions, but I know it's difficult for you to listen occasionally. I also know it's difficult for Steve to talk to himself for half an hour, although he has to do that on several occasions. So thank you for listening. Thank you, Stephen, for your efforts today.
Thank you.
And if you need anything else, please contact us. I look forward to seeing you on a future webinar. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.